I used to think that wheels were pretty simple, but then I read a whole book about wheels, one written by Richard Bolliott, and now I feel inspired to share what I have learned. There are 3 types of wheels. The first one is the wheel set, where you have 2 wheels firmly attached to the axle. The wheels don't rotate individually, instead the entire axle rotates together with the wheels. The second type is a wheel that is not attached to the axle and rotates independently. And the last type is a wheel that rotates not only vertically, but also horizontally. You find this type of wheel on office chairs and shopping trolleys. And this last type is only a few centuries old, but the other 2 have been around for millennia. And the wheel set is the most ancient type. It was invented somewhere around 4000 BC by the copper miners of the Carpathian Mountains. The miners first carried the copper ore out of the mines in baskets, but when they started putting those baskets on wheels and pushing them out of the mine, the rolling baskets wore grooves in the mine floor over time, and this is probably how the idea to put them on tracks came about. These sorts of hand-pushed miners' trolleys were still around thousands of years later, and they were what inspired the invention of trains. So trains are really just an evolved version of a miner's basket on wheels. The independently rotating wheel was invented over 5,000 years ago by the people who inhabited the Pontic-Caspian steppes at the time. The steppe people lived from their wagons and were buried with their wagons when they died, and their invention may well have been inspired by the Carpathian wheel sets. And since the oldest wheels were made from wood, both in the steppes and in the mountains, it's very intuitive to think that you can slice up a tree like a sausage and use those slices as wheels. And you can do that, but you'll make a much more durable wheel if you lay that tree down on its side and have the grain of wood running across the wheels rather than in circles. You can also make your wheel from several separate planks, and as the people of the Eurasian steppes were somewhat short on trees, they started bending the planks they had into a circle and making spoked wheels. Wheels with spokes are lighter in weight, in addition to saving wood, but this sort of wheel is also much more complex to make, so wheels of solid wood carried on being made well into the 20th century. And at the start of this video, I'd said that wheels were first invented in the Carpathians. That's the theory proposed by Richard Bolliott. Some other historians say that the wheel was invented in Mesopotamia. Whoever happens to be right, the people of the Fertile Crescent were definitely using wheels by 3000 BC. And you would think that this wondrous new invention soon made its way to Egypt, but it did not. The Egyptians were completely unimpressed with wheels all the way up to the invention of the chariot, which was the thing that finally got the Egyptians excited. And one might think that after a culture adopts the wheel is going to stay, but that's not really the case. Somewhere between 5 and 100 BC, a new and improved camel saddle was invented, more efficient than ever before. And the people of the Near East largely abandoned wheeled transport and switched to camel caravans. Horses and donkeys were also in the picture, but pack camels were hardy and versatile, and in the Near East they were abundant and cheap. So wheels only started making a comeback in that region with the advent of motorized transport. In Europe, wheeled transport stuck around through the Middle Ages in 2 forms, as 4-wheeled wagons used to transport high-born ladies, and 2-wheeled carts, which the peasants used to cart hay, manure, and such. High-born men rode around on horses, and very much looked down on wagons and carts. In a medieval French poem called Lancelot the Knight of the Cart, Guinevere gets kidnapped. Lancelot rides 2 horses to death while in pursuit, and then travels on foot, and then encounters a dwarf driving a cart, who says that he will tell Lancelot where Guinevere is if the knight agrees to ride in his cart. The medieval poet then goes on to describe the great struggle within Lancelot's heart. On one hand, he loves Guinevere and wants to find her. On the other, he does not want to disgrace himself by riding in a cart. But with time, the horse-mounted knights started to grow obsolete. Men at war started making use of wheel-mounted cannons, and the battle tactic of circling the wagons. Suddenly, wheels did not look quite so unmanly, and by the middle of the early modern period, not only the high-born ladies of Europe travelled on their fancy wagons, but the high-born men as well. And it was definitely not the practicality of coaches that suddenly made them all the rage. As a rule, the roads were absolutely terrible. In 1703, a future Habsburg emperor was travelling through England, and his carriage overturned 12 times on the road from London to Petworth. It would have made so much more sense to just ride on a horse. But it did take European men more than 1,000 years to change their minds about wheeled transport, so the Egyptian lack of enthusiasm about wheels until after the chariot arrived on the scene does not look quite so strange anymore. If there's one thing I learned from this book, then it's that wheels aren't all that impressive. We are impressed with modern-day wheeled vehicles, and we project that onto the much more humble vehicles of the past, or even onto wheels in and of themselves. But when we actually look into the past, we find ancient people disagreeing with us. And the route that wheels took in Eurasia is not the only route there is. The people of Mesoamerica made little clay toys on wheels, but they never built any wheeled transport. Some say that this is because they did not have any draft animals around, but this explanation does not make any sense, because they did have human beings around, and we have human-powered vehicles such as the bicycle, the rickshaw, the wheelbarrow, the baby stroller, the wheelchair, and I'm currently sitting on an office chair that has little caster wheels attached to its legs. And I don't have a horse in my stable, I don't have a stable at all. The Mesoamericans could have invented the hand-pushed trolley, and it's really just an accident of history that they did not. So if your culture does not have any draft animals, then you could give them wheels, and then see where that could go.